Now, first of all, I would like to let you know that this presentation, with the help of Mr. or Dr. McCormick, is really focused on how to help you manage your extended supply chain. This is a difficult topic because it is very much an issue that it is in extensive change right now. Now, right now, your people have to deal with social media, they have to deal with mobile apps, they have to deal with how to more tightly integrate their supply chain and to understand what are the best practices and how you might utilize them to improve your corporation's profitability. Now, we're going to be looking at what you can do to look at your future and what it is that your company and you need to do to be more successful. Next. So this allows me to present to you Dr. Kevin McCormick. He is the president of DRT Research. He is a professor at the Schema Business School in France and Northwood University. This is a man with deep history in business leadership, teaching, and research. He has extensive experience covering many national and international industry segments. He has been a member of or has successfully conducted engagements with several government agencies and major companies in a number of industry areas. Now, I'm not going to go and read all this to you because you can read it yourself, but I'm going to tell you that this is someone that we have connected with our organization because he is a long-range seer of what needs to be done to help companies manage business growth and profitability. Next slide. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. McCormick, who some of you have managed to see at his presentations at the Southeast or the Midwest user group meetings. So Kevin, please take over and tell them what they got to know.
All right, thank you, Bruce. What you're looking at now is an organization chart. It doesn't look like one that most of us are familiar with. There's no hierarchy. Doesn't seem to have any reporting relationships. It's the organization chart for my company, DRK Research, which I founded in 2000. And when I developed this, I had a vision, I had a plan, I had a need. I was working in corporate America for 20 years or so or more, and then did four or five different startups, and I said, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a different way to organize resources and capabilities. So we developed what is now called the networked enterprise, a network company, the networked supply chain. And let me explain what you're looking at here. You have companies that deliver to the clients, to the customers, Percipio, ProfitPoint, Shanghai Consulting, all around the world, which we developed the relationships with, and use our research and use our expertise, use our knowledge. And we have technology companies in the gray circles in the left-hand side, where we deploy their technology in a solution of some kind that we've determined is beneficial. And then we have university and university research centers around the bottom, and they're all over the world. These are ones that are researching things that we're interested in, and this whole group hangs together on a common vision or purpose. We all are process-oriented. We're all looking horizontally at companies and supply chains, and we believe that's the way to make things better. So we have commercial agreements that connect us. the lines that connect the circles to DRK have arrowheads at two sides, so it's a two-way communication, and we've built relationships over the years. So this is what the future of the supply chain will look like. The future of companies is looking like this now, and a lot of the companies you deal with below the surface look like this as well. So this has worked out pretty well. We've been around for 14 years, and we've produced a lot of PhD students that have gone on to be professors, a lot of companies that have been started up. So let's dissect this a little bit. Next slide. Now, what's happened to the supply chain specifically over time? And you can see total quality management, supply-based assessment, etc. This is what I've seen, and many of you have been involved in since 1980, 81, 82. Total quality management came about. People were implementing process-oriented quality programs, participative management, and improving supplier performance through quality programs and definition. So that worked out pretty well, but there seemed to be some issues. Suppliers were many and distant, and somewhat they had a conflict between you and your suppliers. So supply-based assessment came about, where you went and systematically looked at your suppliers and what they did and how they did it, and sometimes helped them do better. Sometimes they helped you. That came about in the late 80s, early 90s. Supply-based reduction then came about. Everybody said, you've got too many suppliers. You need to reduce the number and focus, and on and on. So a lot of people went through and reduced their suppliers from 3 or 4 or 5,000 down to 1,000, which means you're more dependent on fewer suppliers. So reactive supplier development came about to say, gee, we need to fix these suppliers that are having performance issues, and risk management came about as well, where we need to evaluate the risk of our supply chain. And oh, by the way, we need to do strategic supplier development, where we need to identify the different classes of suppliers and build relationships with the more important ones, and the ones that are just transactional. We need to not spend as much time with them, and we need to develop strategic contracts. So that came about over the last 10 years. And now what's happening, and I'll explain why in a minute, supply network management is coming about, where people are looking at their supply chain and saying, you know, we have some organizing principles here, where we can organize our relationships with suppliers and focus them on a goal or objective, or we can treat this as a company, we can manage the interaction. All kinds of words are coming about. So supply network management is starting to appear as, I'd say, the next evolution of this chain of events. And it's being, there's benefits, they're showing benefits, and it's an interesting area. So let's go to the next slide. So one of the reasons it's coming about, and one of the reasons that most people have a global supply chain they're trying to manage. 20 years ago, being global was difficult. 30 years ago was even more difficult. Long-distance calls were expensive. Fax machines were just new inventions and cost you $20 to send a fax and all kinds of things. So being global was not something everybody was rushing to. 20 years ago, it started to appear. It got easier. 10 years ago, it even got easier. And this is why what you're looking at is a graphical representation of what I call friction, capability, and connectivity. Friction being the horizontal axis, capability being one of the vertical axes, and connectivity being the other. So in the early years, people-to-people was the only way. High friction, low capability, was really a pain to, you had to write letters and deliver letters. It took weeks to send a letter across the United States. So telegraph came about, the post office came into play, telephones, radio, all these things were there to reduce friction, improve connectivity, and improve capabilities. More information was sent more often and easier. So as things evolved from 1930, 1940 to the development of the internet, basically, is what really sent the friction down in the early 90s. And then you see internet wireless and mobile wireless, these things up in the upper right-hand corner. Friction is almost gone. It's very easy to communicate with anybody anywhere in the world. You can get a FaceTime call. You can do a Skype video call for free between users of Skype or users of FaceTime anywhere in the world at any time. They're very capable, the connectivity is very high, and the cost is very low. So the friction that allows you to interconnect and communicate and collaborate is at zero almost. So what does this do to your supply chain? What do you do with this capability and connectivity to improve your supply chain and improve your business? Many businesses still rely on the big the conference centers where they have big screens and cameras, and it's expensive to make a video call and people move funny rather than rely on what they do in their personal life, which is a FaceTime call. So let's explore this a little bit more. Next slide. This is a procure-to-pay process, and this is how many of us perceive the interaction with suppliers. So a company would have a procure-to-pay process like is shown here, where there's different departments that cooperate to execute this process. You've got forecast, plan, and coordinate, where people generally build budgets and plans and decide how much they're going to buy and from whom and this kind of thing, and get this organized and get it going. Need clarification and specification is usually a combination between the purchasing group and the end user group, and developing specs and procurement requirements such as lead time and cost desires, these kind of things. Then the sourcing decision, where people evaluate RFPs and they send out, get quotes, and they negotiate and build. In the next box, they build contracts. And this blue area here, this light blue area, is generally where, in the past, we perceive we interact with suppliers. We send out a specification, they bid on it, we evaluate the bids, and then we award the contract, and then over time we place orders, and they send in goods and materials, and then the settle and pay department pays them. So this is, I guess, prior to the collapse of friction, this is the old view. And many people still have this view. Now, what's the new view? Next slide. And this is just, the process is the same. You see the blue and the bluish arrows down here. Because of the collapse of friction and the increase of capabilities and connectivity, suppliers are starting to, and many have done this for a couple years, and several software companies are advertising that they can do this, and it's easy to do, and encouraging people to do this. They're really interacting with the process and the people within companies, either formally or informally, along the whole process. They're connected. They have rich communications. Let me give you an example. I was working with a major automotive company a couple years ago, and I asked them about clutches and brakes, and who was the expert in clutches and brakes, and they said, well, John Smith So, well, I need to talk with John Smith. Well, he's with this supplier, and the supplier's located about 100 miles from here. So we need to arrange that. I'm going, well, don't you have an internal expert? No, John Smith, these people, they know everything about brakes and clutches. So if we need a specification or something new and to change the specification, we need to talk with them. And I kept going and started talking about chassis, and then started talking about engines, and the answer was the same, that the suppliers had the expertise and developed the specification in concert with the owner of the company or the people working within the company. So then I backed up a little bit and said, well, how about the forecast for next year? I mean, what are we going to purchase for next year? And how can we plan for it? And they said, well, we haven't assembled the forecast from the suppliers yet, but we have our official one that comes from the company, but it's always wrong. But the suppliers know pretty much how much we're going to produce and when it's going to be shipped and this kind of thing. So we need to assemble that with the supplier. So this was 4 or 5 years ago. Now it's becoming almost commonplace. These interactions are there. They're happening in an informal organization or sometimes a formal organization. Sourcing decisions are done cooperatively, collaboratively. And the contract and PO generation is still there. And the settle and pay is electronic invoices and other things connecting suppliers closer and closer to the settle and pay process. So what this has done is made these connections affordable, easy, desirable, beneficial, and they've appeared. Some people have taken advantage of them, others haven't. So let's talk a little bit more about how you can take advantage of these things and what you can actually do with this. Next slide. This is kind of a weird-looking diagram, but I did this in 1999, 98 or 99, when I was researching the network and organizing networks, and we're publishing a book on supply chain networks. This is what I saw being done with the leading companies. They would be the network organizer, this SC network organizer. That would be the company like a Chrysler or a GM or a Cisco, or these are the buying companies. They would appoint a commodity manager. They'd organize their spend by commodity groups. This is becoming commonplace now. They would appoint a commodity manager, and that a commodity manager would identify the suppliers that exist within their commodity group, and then start to organize these suppliers and interact with these suppliers, and maybe sort through and maybe get new suppliers, remove some old ones, but basically run this as a business focused on the goals of the company. So the supply chain network organizer would be, for smaller commodities, there'd be a young procurement manager. For larger commodity groups, there'd be a senior commodity manager. And so as the friction has gone down and the technology has gone up in capability and connectivity, and things like social media have become commonplace, and people connecting across social media is becoming commonplace. These organizations here have really become very productive, very tight, very capable in the better companies. For example, the interactions between the supplier, the things you see in an S, and the network organizer, years ago they were EDI. So people put in EDI networks, and they would send an order, and they would get the receipt of the order, and they would communicate in structured messages that way, and that was the beginnings of the connection, beginnings of the interaction. And then they would send an invoice, and the invoice would be paid. Then they talked about forecast and plans, and they would go back and forth there. And then relationships would exist along this line, and social relationships as well as business relationships, and people would exchange pictures and vacation plans and social media sites were put in place to organize these commodity networks and help people communicate at a higher level. And events were organized, and these became very tight, very rich groups. So I guess the question is, where are they going, and what are they using to increase the performance of these groups, and who's doing it? Okay, next slide. So these are some aspects of the network that you need to be aware of and consider when you build these networks, which is the first step in organizing your extended supply chain. You've got the performance and relationship and the actual goods and orders and other things going across the interaction and relationship line. So that's one of the first things you see, and that's one of the first things you're aware of, and you apply technology to and other things. Those are really the easy ones, but sometimes they seem a little bit challenging. The invoices and the electronic payments can get a little challenging. And then you've got the supplier attributes, which are, let's call them personality traits of the supplier. How do they manage human resources? What's their pay level? What's their turnover? How do they manage supply chain disruptions? And what is their financial health? Are they well funded and internally funded, or are they externally funded? Are they a stock-driven company? These are things that influence the relationship, and you need to understand them. And the environment, the supplier environment, what environment do they exist in, and what's their market, and what's the geographic area they exist in, and what can impact them, which can then impact your commodity group. So it gets to be deep and rich and pretty strong relationships. So this is a key aspect of organizing your network. Next slide. Now let's kind of summarize a little bit, just capture what I've been saying. The basics: orders, goods, money. If you do this in a self-service way, somewhat automated way, it becomes very efficient, and it's very repetitive, and very able to describe it in advance. And a lot of people work in that area, and they do that. And the communication is one where many people don't do it two-way. They just send orders or commands or information out, and they don't have a two-way communication with their suppliers. You absolutely have to have that. And you can do that easily with Facebook or LinkedIn or just email. It's very easy to do. You just have to do it. Face-to-face meetings are still important. Let me stress that. With very strong relationship with suppliers, you might have a monthly face-to-face. With less intense relationships, it may be quarterly or just annually with transactional. But face-to-face, getting to know each other, video calls, frequent video calls where it's quasi-face-to-face are still important. We're still human beings, and human-to-human contact is still important in building these relationships. And I'll talk about that a little bit more, what people are doing in that area. Proximity, which is an attribute that most of us misunderstand. We think of proximity as being close to somebody physically, or being close to a company physically. This geographic proximity, as mentioned here. That's just one aspect. There are many other aspects of proximity that make you close to someone or some organization. For example, organizational proximity, meaning your organizations work alike, and you're familiar with how your supplier organization works, and they're familiar with yours. Many of the automotive suppliers are spin-offs from the automotive companies, and are organized in similar ways. So they have high organizational proximity, which makes it easier to build relationships and deep relationships. Institutional proximity is very similar to organizational proximity. You know who to communicate with, and you know who's in charge, and you have a form of hierarchy that's consistent with yours, and so you know the politics within the supplier, and they know yours, and you can get the feel for this when you hear these terms discussed. Now, cognitive proximity is one that really has come about as we've globalized the supply chain. Do you think alike? Does your supplier think like you or your company? Now, as we've got global suppliers in Brazil, let's say, or in Asia, or in China, or in Europe, in Germany, cognitive proximity has gotten to be a big issue. And a lot of misunderstandings have been emerged this way, and it's something that you need to really work at. How do they think? How do you think? And how can you explain something so that they'll get the true meaning of what you intend, as opposed to perception of a meaning that may be wrong? A lot of it's with language. So social media and can really influence this cognitive proximity a lot. So social proximity is another thing. Human beings are social, and they need to interact, and they need to exchange details about each other. They need to have friendships be made. All these are important to get your network working, get your organization working. Award dinners, where you award the best performing supplier of your network, and you can do it virtually on Skype and have the awards given out, or you can have everybody come to a physical location if you're close. But these social aspects are important. So the goal of all of these things is to build your network and be what's called a customer of choice. The customer of choice is a very important status where your suppliers look at you as their preferred customer. They want to do business with you before other customers. And this is a very important concept that is now emerging over the last 10 years. It says, suppliers make decisions, and they award scarce resources to customers, and if you're the customer of choice, you'll get those resources first before the other customers. One example of this, when I was working with the automotive companies a few years ago, I interviewed about 3,000 suppliers, my team and I, and it was all over the world, so it was very interesting to hear what the suppliers had to say, multiple tiers of suppliers. And we asked each of them, one of the questions we asked is, what's your favorite customer? Who's your favorite company that you like to work with, and why? And some were a little bit reluctant, but most would freely talk about it and say, no, we like company X because they're easy to work with, they treat us well, they have good information, and they pay their bills reasonably on time, and we think their ideas are good. All describing these customer choice aspects. So he said, great, that's great, we know who that company is. Now, who's your worst customer? Who do you really don't like to work with, and who really it's just painful to work with them? So they would say, okay, it's company Y. And it was almost unanimous who company Y was. And I won't mention the companies. You all probably know who they are. And we looked at the difference in pricing and performance, and it was dramatic. The companies that were preferred had probably a 5 to 15% performance benefit, meaning the on-time arrivals were always there. They had a very high on-time arrival rate and high perfect order rate, where all the items of the order were there and they're on time. and their cost was a couple percentage points lower. And in automotive, that's a big deal. So the non-preferred customers were not getting the preferred service, and the preferred customers were. So it really was worth significant investment. It's becoming clear now. So that's what these networks help organize, and the use of the technologies will help you get a little bit better at that. Next slide. So let's talk about I guess it's the near present or the near future. What are people doing besides organizing as commodities and improving the relationships and things like that we talked about? Let's call those soft things. What are the hard things they're doing to make their purchasing and their procurement very frictionless, very easy? So you see on this diagram, I show a hub. It's called an Amazon-like hub, since most people, and in fact I surveyed one of my classes on Tuesday, and I asked them how many people had purchased something on Amazon in the last couple weeks, and everybody raised their hand. And over the last 10 or 15 years, you know that number has increased steadily, and now everybody has been on Amazon and purchased something off of Amazon. And they're used to that, and they're used to the way that's done. So why can't we put Amazon-like hubs, mini-zons, or whatever you want to call it, in the commodity groups so that the customers in the network organizer group can get on, find what they want in a pre-approved catalog at a pre-approved price under contract, place the order goes out to the supplier, and the supplier sends the goods in, and the bill is paid. We do it now in our lives, our private lives. Everybody does it. It's second nature. Why can't we do it here? Well, we've done a couple, and there's a lot of people that tried to do this over the last 10 years, and they had it wrong. So what's the right way to do it? Well, the technology's pervasive. It's everywhere now. It takes a lot to organize it. One thing is the network organizer has to pay for it, and not ask the suppliers to pay for it. That's a major error many people made, is they would ask the suppliers to pay $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 each. But as you can see from the picture, up in the upper left-hand corner, you see the supplier and other networks. These suppliers have 10 or 15 other customers they deal with, and if they had to pay that for every customer, it starts to get pretty expensive and tedious. So a lot of suppliers didn't go along with it. And each of the standards were different, so it became chaos, and it collapsed. So how is this successful, this Amazon hub, where the network organizer customers can get on, find what they want, order it at a pre-approved price with pre-approved delivery specifications, get it sent to them, get the bill paid, suppliers are happy, their invoice is electronic, their payment's electronic, their order is electronic, there's no purchasing involved other than negotiating the contracts. And you see from $2.50 per PO to less than $5. That's what the benchmark is, where it's probably a minimum. If a buyer is involved, it's going to cost you $250 or $500 a purchase order. And if you bypass the buyer after the contract is made and the price is approved and agreed to, the total cost is a couple dollars to a couple cents, very minuscule. So this would make your commodity hub very efficient, and I mentioned we've done this twice, and we're involved in trying to do it a third time for a multi-billion-dollar area. And I guess I have to ask, why aren't more people doing this successfully? Why isn't this pervasive? Why isn't this everywhere? Technology's there. The desire's there. The customers are used to it. They know how to do it. The SC network organizer people that are within that company have all been on Amazon. They all go on Travelocity or Expedia or somebody like that and make their travel reservations. So I think it's really ramping up. And this is the area that's going to make the supply chain future very exciting and really turn it on its head. So the Amazon Hub, the network organization, the relationships, the organizing by commodity categories, the contract negotiation and establishment before this is done, it's all critical. Okay, next slide. So, we talked about the customer choice a little bit. This is something that really makes a difference. Let's say you make a network and you organize a network and you put in your Amazon Hub, but you're not the customer of choice. You have a culture that keeps your suppliers at arm's length and creates conflict and has contracts written all to your advantage, all to the network organizer's advantage, and you're looked upon as one of the non-customers of choice. You're not going to realize the benefits of the Amazon Hub and organizing by commodity. You're going to be 5 or 10 or 15% behind the curve until the I guess the culture or the method or the behaviors are changed. So if you're in that zone and you're in the middle of that and you're a commodity manager and your company culture is such that it keeps your suppliers at arm's length and treats them like dirt and all kinds of other things, you should probably get your resume ready and look for another job because you're not going to be successful at doing this. So the network organizer has control of this. This is all in their behaviors and their attitudes and their efforts. Okay, next slide. I threw some research that shows how this relates to performance. These are data sets we have of different companies in the automotive industry and the plastic industry. I changed the names of the companies and other things. You can see the different attributes we measure and related to relationship, which is then statistically related to network performance. And you can see in the graph that it's just short of a 45-degree slope. And as the relationship increases, the performance increases. So this is what we keep seeing. 30% improvement in relationship factors leads to 8 to 10% improvement in network performance. So relationship matters, and we've got some hard data that shows that. Next slide. This is information sharing across the network, and you can see all the different aspects of information sharing. Again, it's the same set of companies in automotive and in plastics. Critical information sharing goes up, performance goes up. Just that clear. Next slide. These are financial indicators that show financial stress. This is not specific numbers. This is just asking them to rate themselves on a scale, and you're just measuring stress within the company, and you can see that financial indicator increase also is related to performance in the network. So that's a very important factor, is knowing and measuring the stress that your supplier's under and helping them relieve that stress. A lot of it's caused by the network organizer. Next slide. Okay, let's talk about how you build this. The web's been around for well over 20 years, so I think internet technologies are stable. They're everywhere. They're easy to do. So the Amazon-type hub is easy to build if you have the right direction and attitude. And the network organizer has to pay for it. Okay, social networks, people are using these in their daily life to enrich their relationships between their relatives, their kids, their parents, their friends, their LinkedIn as well as Facebook. We've got clients that build Facebook sites for their commodity group and then have people their suppliers sign up for that Facebook site that's dedicated to that commodity group, and they use that for free. and it works well. LinkedIn has the same capability. So it's not very expensive to do this, to organize and build these linkages with a purpose to improve the commodity group and to belong to the commodity group and to share richer information. Now, mobile apps. This is one that is really interesting. That I'd say 90+% of the people around the world have smartphones with email on it, with text messages, with FaceTime or Skype. I don't know, maybe not 90% if you take into account Africa, but it's quickly getting up there. Most everybody you deal with in a supplier organization has a smartphone, as do you. So what is that going to do to a supply chain is that you as a network organizer, let's say, are no longer chained to a desk and chained to a hard network. You can do your job from anywhere at any time. It also opens up your day where if you're dealing with a company in China, you're working at late at night, in Australia, so there's a lot of stress on it. So mobile apps are good and bad. iPads, everybody is using an iPad or a Samsung phone or something like that, so they're getting used to that visual touch thing. What's that going to do? I'm not sure. I believe it's going to connect everybody anywhere. And it's going to allow supply chain network organizers to get out with suppliers and do more face-to-face with suppliers and still maintain their work in the network and as a network organizer, because they take their office with them with their iPad or their iPhone. And it's still early, so we're not quite sure what's going to happen with that, but it allows more flexibility and makes it easier to play in this game. Bring your own device. That's another issue that is really driving internal IT groups crazy. People's personal devices are much more capable than the ones they get from their company. That's just the way it is. And companies should leverage that and use that and let people access their apps or their functions or their emails and other things through their own personal devices. And I'm not sure what's going to happen here. There's a crash of worlds, and security is a big thought, and everybody's talking about how do we make it secure, how do we isolate it, how do we separate your own devices from you. So you have two phones, one for business, one for personal. That's silly. So these issues have to be worked out in the future, and they are, and they will be. So I guess the bottom line is you're no longer tied to a desk and a device, and you as a network organizer or as a supplier can be everywhere, anywhere, and still connect to your network and your customers. Next slide. So the issues are primarily who pays for the Amazon hub, and I'm saying the network organizer has to. In order for it to be successful, that's what has to happen. Suppliers have to connect to many networks with many different formats. How do they do that? Well, there are standards that Amazon issues and say, this is what you have to give us, and this has to be the form, and this has to look this way. But every company, is there an international standard that a company can adhere to? Not yet. So it becomes a problem. It's a challenge. It's a speed bump. Confidentiality, who controls it, who sets the rules? How do you keep one supplier from seeing the other supplier's stuff and the prices? And it's to be pretty hairy. Nobody's solved it yet, but it will be. It's something you have to take into account. Big data and analytics. When you have an Amazon-like hub, you generate a lot of data and a lot of behavior data. and a lot of data in the social networks. What do you do with all of that? How do you analyze it? How do you use it? How do you protect individual confidentiality? It's a big issue, and it will take a couple years to resolve this, if ever. It's just getting bigger. Trust is a big one. Is it getting better, or is it getting worse? Do you trust your suppliers? Do suppliers trust you? Opportunistic behavior is the last one here, is cheating. Human nature, when they see an opportunity to do something to their advantage at somebody else's disadvantage, and they'll cheat. So how do you stop people from cheating? How do you maintain order in a network? And you, as a network organizer, are the arbitrator of this arbitrator. You're the person in charge of the network. You're the one that has to maintain order and detect cheating. It's a big one, something you got to be concerned with. So these issues aren't solved yet, but they are near to be, and next year when I give this presentation, or the next couple of months, maybe a couple of them will get better formed and better understood. But these are the issues as we see it. Next slide. So what should you do about this? Build the key relationships, organize that network, become the customer of choice, and use things like Amazon type technology and LinkedIn for your rich social networks. They're out there. LinkedIn is free, and Amazon isn't, but they're getting cheaper and cheaper to get an Amazon network up and play. Big data, self-service analytics, self-service ordering, and self-service catalog selection. All this is possible, and trust to make it better. You got to work hard to make it better, and enforce the rules. Detect opportunistic behavior and enforce those rules. And bring your own device, BYOD, and mobile. It's here. Figure out how to deal with it and how to leverage it. It's probably going to accelerate, so you need to develop ways and methods to make the security people feel a little bit better than they do now. So, all right, next slide.